Nintendo Switch 2's battery life's gotten a lot of heat. It seems to be one of the main complaints when you look at all the reviews. But really, how bad is it? I'm gonna do a deep dive into the Switch 2's battery life. How long do all the big Switch 2 releases like Mario Kart World and Cyberpunk 2077 last? What about games with Switch 2 updates like Hogwarts Legacy and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? For those games, it's also gonna be interesting to compare how long those same Switch 1 versions running on Switch 2 last. And what about regular Switch 1 games without any updates? Lots of numbers and data to cover here, and I'm gonna start with the biggest Switch 2 game, Mario Kart World. I have the game on 3 settings here. Maximum, the brightness and sound is maxed out. Then there's medium, where the brightness and sound is on medium, and minimum, where I turn the brightness and sound all the way down. I'm connected to Nintendo Online and auto brightness is off. All 3 consoles at 100%. Let's get this test started. After 1 hour, max is at 61%, while both the minimum and medium are at 65%. After 2 hours, max is at 15%, medium at 26%, and minimum at 27%. The console with maximum settings got the 1% warning at 2 hours and 16 minutes. And Mario Kart World on Switch 2 with maxed out brightness powered off at 2 hours and 22 minutes. So that's the absolute lowest battery life a relatively new Switch 2 gets. The console with medium settings got the 1% warning at 2 hours and 39 minutes. Minimum settings was right behind. It got the 1% warning 2 minutes later. The medium settings console powered off at 2 hours and 44 minutes, and the console with minimum settings powered off at 2 hours and 47 minutes. And that's really the longest Switch 2 is gonna last with Mario Kart World. Now, I don't recommend anyone play with brightness turned all the way down. It's hard to see even with the lights turned off here. Also, there doesn't seem to be a huge benefit of actually turning that brightness all the way down. The difference here between minimum and medium settings is only 3 minutes. But when you go from medium all the way to max brightness and sound, you lose 22 minutes. If you want the best battery life, don't play with maxed out brightness and sound either. Perhaps turn that auto brightness toggle on. That should help with getting the best play experience and some decent battery life. Cyberpunk 2077 is the other big release. This is a game that gets used a lot to benchmark gaming PCs. Here I'm at medium settings that I always use. Pretty much sat down and played until the battery died. We're at 60% after 1 hour, there's 18% after 2 hours, and the 1% warning came at 2 hours and 22 minutes. And finally, Cyberpunk 2077 on Switch 2 powered off at 2 hours and 27 minutes. Next, let's look at Hogwarts Legacy. This is, of course, the Switch 2 version. By the way, there's a way to get this game for only $10. I talked about that in an earlier video. I also have another console here where I'm running the Switch 1 version on the Switch 2 console. Both consoles at 100%. I sat down and played them both. This was one of those games that had relatively short battery life even on the Switch 1. The Switch 2 version got the 1% warning at 3 hours and 4 minutes, and it powered off at 3 hours and 9 minutes. So Hogwarts Legacy with Switch 2 update gets longer battery life than Mario Kart World and Cyberpunk. The Switch 1 version got the 1% warning at 3 hours and 48 minutes, and that old version on the Switch 2 powered off at 3 hours and 55 minutes. Here's how Hogwarts Legacy compares on Switch 2 versus all the different Switch 1 consoles. I mean, this one isn't too bad. It seems like Warner Bros. Did a good job of optimizing and getting somewhat similar battery life on that new console as well. Sure, the Switch 1 version's less demanding and gets longer battery life, but the update Switch 2 version isn't bad. I did show the battery life of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on Switch 2 in a technical review earlier, but the one question that kept coming up in comments was how long does the Switch 1 version running on the Switch 2 console last as well? I went back and played Tears of the Kingdom on Switch 2 without any update. I had to restart the game on a whole new profile because once you apply the Switch 2 update on your main Nintendo account, there doesn't seem to be a way to go back to the Switch 1 version. This game does use the exact same save file between the Switch 1 and Switch Switch 2, so you can continue playing on your older console as well. The Switch 2 version got the 1% warning at 2 hours and 47 minutes, and then it powered off at 2 hours and 53 minutes. The Switch 1 version was going strong, well over 4 hours. The 1% warning came at 4 hours and 27 minutes, and Tears of the Kingdom with no Switch 2 update lasted 4 hours and 36 minutes. Here's how the game compares on the Switch 2 versus all the different Switch 1 consoles. Sure, with improved graphics and doubled FPS, you get less than 3 hours, but perhaps a fair comparison is running the exact same Switch 1 version on Switch 2. And in that case, Switch 2 is not bad. It's better than the original launch edition Nintendo Switch. It's even better than the Nintendo Switch Lite. This got me wondering, how long are other Switch 1 games gonna last? So I picked 2 more Switch 1 titles here, Super Mario Wonder and Metroid Prime Remastered. Both are at medium settings here, 100% battery, and I sat down and played them both until the Switch powered off. Reason I chose Metroid Prime Remastered was because this game actually has amazingly long battery life on the Switch 1. And Super Mario Wonder, well, that might just be the biggest game without a Switch 2 upgrade for now. Super Mario Wonder got the 1% warning at 3 hours and 44 minutes, and Super Mario Wonder on Switch 2 powered off at 3 hours and 54 minutes. Metroid Prime Remastered got the 1% warning at 4 hours and 40 minutes, and that game powered off at 4 hours and 50 minutes. Here's how long Super Mario Wonder on Switch 2 compares to the numbers I had gotten on Switch 1 consoles. I mean, not bad, right? Here's also Metroid Prime Remastered across all the consoles. Sure, the Switch 2 isn't as good as almost 7 hours on the Switch OLED, but 10 minutes short of 5 hours isn't that bad. And at launch, Switch 2 is still better, much better than the launch edition Switch 1. Comparing Switch 2 to other handhelds, Switch 2 ranges anywhere between 2.5 and 4.5 hours, as you can see. Steam Deck gets 1.5 to 4 hours. The Steam Deck OLED gets anywhere between 2.5 hours on the low end and as high as 5.5 hours on other games. Other handhelds like the Rogue Ally X are in that same ballpark, so Switch 2 is similar to other handhelds as well. Now that is a lot of battery life data. I played a lot of games, drained and charged my Switch 2 console a bunch of times. So how long does it take to fully charge a Switch 2 from 0%? Well, I tested that. I started at the bottom at 0%. I checked in on the console after 2 hours and it was 93%. All in all, it took 2 hours and 25 minutes to fully charge to 100%. Here I did charge the console while it was on sleep. I'm sure you can charge it slightly faster if you actually turn the console off. The Switch 2 charges at around 10 to 15 watts, while the Switch 1 charged at around the same range, around 18 watts. The Switch 2 does have a 60 watt power supply that gets used when you're in dock mode, so there's a big difference, a big increase in performance when you're in that dock mode versus handheld. For comparison, the Switch 1 only drew around 15 watts even in dock mode. So finally, here's the battery life of Switch 2 with all the games I covered today. I also threw in Fortnite here, which I had tested in a separate video. Overall, I don't think the battery life's as bad as people are making it out to be. Sure, demanding games aren't gonna last as long, but the older Switch 1 titles run almost as long, but now on a larger screen. I'm sure in a couple of years, Nintendo's gonna release updated hardware with improved battery life, an OLED version perhaps that should also increase battery life, but for now, I'm personally okay with what we get. How about you? Leave your comments below. What do you think about the battery life after seeing all these numbers, all of this information that I shared?